And I would say, let me thank the organizers for giving me an opportunity to be a participant in the sushruta celebrations. Now the question is, sushruta. Who is sushruta? Often people say sushruta is a father of surgery, but I don't consider him as a father, because if you consider him as a father, you will also have to search for the mother of surgery. Sushruta was not really the father, and even before Sushruta surgery existed. But Sushruta was the model surgeon who standardized the practice, standardized the education methods of surgery, and then documented it. And it's one of the most oldest, rather, the document of surgery and surgical education and ethics of surgery. So from that point of view, we respect Sushruta as a model surgeon and a preacher, and a model surgeon of Indian surgery as such. Now, the question comes in like, who is Sushruta and what was his personality? Now, if you look at the physical features, of course, we may not be able to see Sushruta, but based upon the physical features as documented in some areas, you will have lots of confusing issues. The image which you see on the screen is the image of the Sushruta's idol seen in Banaras Hindu University. Then if you look at the websites, go for search in the websites for Sushruta's image, you will see very popular image which of Sushruta doing conducting surgery. Sushruta conducting in some other website related to Ayurveda, the image of Sushruta. A image of Sushruta seen in Iranian website is image of Sushruta in some other website as such, where Sushruta doing surgery. Sushruta's image seen on a temple claimed to be of Sushruta, and another image of Sushruta found on web search, or imagination of Sushruta about Sushruta have even taken to the bedroom, another image on web search, a British artwork depicting Sushruta, and a South Indian drawing Sushruta as such, again web search as such, folk art about Sushruta, and another image of Sushruta floated in the internet, or Egyptian website depicting Sushruta, or Pakistani website showing Sushruta, a Kerala pharmacy depicting Sushruta like this in website. Now, so on. Now you will have plenty of other choices also. The point is, there is no fun or no substance in discussing about Sushruta has a beard or not, whether Sushruta was physically well built or not, his physical characters. But Sushruta is a personification of some traits, and I would look at Sushruta in such a way that where you have certain specific human qualities, human traits, and some of these I will try to look at assess the human traits in Sushruta based upon the Samhita. Now, some of those important traits which I have recognized in Sushruta is empathy personified. He is the one who had identified the relationship between the patient and the surgeon, which is much better than, or which is more than, the relationship between a mother and a child. And he says, Mataram Pitaram Putran Bandhavan Apitaturaha Apyetan Abhishanketa Vaidya Vishwasametja Visudati Atmanam Atmanam Najainam Preshankate. It's a very model, a universal model for any medical practitioner or medical professional, and probably one of the best description of the empathy personification. Sushruta is a model for a purposeful career option. When Sushruta studied Ayurveda and Ayurvedic surgery with a specific purpose, the purpose was Tatra Sukheshinam Sanatana Anatavat Vijayasmanan Dushva Manasinha Pida Bhavati Tesham Sukheshinam Rogopashimartham Atmanashta Pranayathartham Prajahiteheto Ayurvedam Shotavichamahi Budhishamanam Atra Aitam Aiham Amshkam Shreya. When he opted for the discipline of studying Ayurveda and surgery, he had that clear idea of attempting to reduce the suffering of the people who are suffering due to the diseases. Persons who are suffering due to the diseases, though they may have many caretakers, they are as good as orphans, and no relation, no family relative can share the suffering. It's only the physician who can reduce the suffering, and hence he preferred the choice of the medicine career. At the same time, another important is the studying this medicine would be also help in your this image in the society, as well as it gives a occupation, profession. That's another important issue. In those days when Vedic education was considered to be a selfless study, and it's like you are not supposed to gain anything. Sushruta was the first radical person who would say that I would be building a career. So the service to the society also is used for the your own welfare also. That's also the important issue. Then another important character of trait of Sushruta is a positive outlook during surgery, creating a positive outlook of the patient with the legal blinding. Now to legal obligations as such. In the present day situation, a surgical consent has to be taken, giving the patient about all the positive, negative issues, explaining all the complications as such as per the Nuremberg Declaration, which is the legal binding now. But Sushruta's approach to counseling of a patient prior to the surgery would be giving a positive outlook to the patient, so that he had to worship the God, he had to have that Bali Mangala Swasti Vachana. So that Swasti Vachana itself is one of the important issues. At the same time, the surgeon would not go beyond the legal issues. Wherever there is a need for the legal permission, that legal permission had to be taken. Like even to start the practice, he had to have a license. Adhigata Tantena, Upasita Tantrathena, Dustakarmana, Kritayogena, Shastram Nigatara, Rajanujnatena, the practice had to be started. And whenever there is a issue of poor prognosis, again a legal permission had to be taken, as in case of the Ashmani surgery. Akriyayam dho mrityuh priyayam samshayobhe prasmat apritya kartavyam ishwaram sadhukarana. So wherever there is a need for legal permission, that had to follow. So the message is, the patient has to be given a positive outlook, but that positive outlook is not enticing the patient, that it should be a clear issue, and all the legal obligations have to be followed. In the present day situation, we have a different setup where before we take the consent of the patient has to be explained about all the possible negative effects of the surgery, and at that situation, naturally, psychologically, that kind of energetic counseling would not be really beneficial. There is a need to review the current situation and maybe take some leaf out of what Sushruta's model is. I would recognize Sushruta also as a standard educationist. The method of gaining the knowledge and perfection is gaining Vaksosve, Arthavijnane, Pragarabhi, Karmanipune, Tadabhyase, Siddhoja, Yateta Adhyaranantagaha. To get the perfection, you need to go step by step, and that step by step process is described as gaining a vocabulary, or having a command on vocabulary, and having a perfect meaning, understanding the meaning of the words which are expressed, and having a broad-based knowledge of the same subject which you have studied, developing the skills of that, and repeated practice of the skills so that it become perfect. Now, the very popular in the present day situation, and whenever I go to the education, usually the stress is given to the model of education as the Miller's prism of clinical competence, which is again just a poor model or poor copy of what Sushruta has said, where the study starts from knows, how, and shows. That's how it is gained, and with the knowledge, skills, and attitudes, which are the other three issues which combined together. So in front of what Sushruta has mentioned as the method of education, this model, I would say, as childish. Sushruta was more evolved as it. Now, another important issue of education is for a proper education, you need to study, but the study should not be in a continuous manner, or should not be overburdened. There has to be a gap, and the student during the study has to be related to the social conditions. That's what Sushruta would say, like Krishnastami Tannidhani Hanidve Shukla Tatapi Evam Had Visanjam. So once in a week, unlike as we take up on Sunday, similarly, once in a week, the student should be of the study, and he should divert his attention to the social issues or the current issues so that he can become relevant. And that's a very important aspect of the proper study, that it's not that you continue to study without interruption, that in between interruptions, diversions are necessary to keep you focused. That's it. At the same time, these interruptions also are to be followed when there is a natural calamity, when there is a national issues. In such conditions, the interruption has to be followed, and this also is one of the important keys of standard education, and that kind of a principled, methodical method of learning is established by sushruta. Sushruta also as a social reformer. In those days when the Vedic education was not allowed for the lower categories of the society, sushruta was a person who would even allow Shudramapi Kulaguna Sampannam Mantavardyam Anupanitam Adhyapayediteke. The other lower community also was allowed to learn, and this is one of the important social reform discipline. Sushruta was a practical discipline area. Discipline in relation to the behavior, in relation to the dressing, appearance, and the character. These are imposed on the students as well as a practitioner. And imposition of a discipline on others, or the students, on the subsidiaries, is a very well known and easy option. But Sushruta's model would be when such a discipline is imposed, and if the leader or the teacher who is prejudiced, he is not really following that discipline or appreciating that methodically, then the teacher also would have a reverse punishment, and that's an important issue. Aham tai samyak vartamane yadi anyatha dashityam yeno bhavayam apalvidyasta. A teacher telling to the student, like, when you are following the norms properly, when you are in a proper discipline, if as a teacher I would become prejudiced, then I would become a sinner, and the knowledge would not, which I have, would be useless. Now, this kind of a imposition of a discipline on the teacher, imposition of discipline on the superior, is the model of sushruta, of a practical disciplinarian. Imposing discipline on others is a very easy job which everyone does, but a reverse imposition of the discipline on yourself is the ideal of sushruta. Sushruta also was sensitive to social perceptions. In the medical career, the character of the medicine person is one of the most observed issue in the society, and it has to be maintained in a way that the character has to be seen. It's not that it is maintained, it is seen to be maintained, and that's why Sushruta says, like, during the whole career, you need to be aware of the possibility of being social perception about your interaction with the opposite sex, and it should be in a very moderate method, and that's what Sushruta says. Stribhi sahasyam samvasam parihasam javadet prattanjatabhyam nadeyam nanadanyat bhishagurehi. When you interact with the persons of other sex, your behavior should be seen to be optimum, seen to be proper, and there should not be an excess which could be wrongly perceived by the society. Sushruta was a model innovator. The whole idea of developing the surgical instruments was from the nature, where looking at the method of grasping the object of animals and birds was the stimulus to devise the surgical instruments. And Nana Prakaranam Vyalanam Druhapakshanam Dhutaihi Mukhani Yadranam Prashat Sadashan Tasmat Sarupyat, based upon that natural activities, or Agamat, based upon the traditional knowledge which has been there for generations together. Upadesha, as you are taught by your teacher or your peers, or Anyantra Darshana, by looking at the instruments and models used by others, you have to devise. Now, this kind of innovation based upon the multiple inputs is a very important character of a ideal innovator, and that's what we have to recognize. And that's one of the important traits of Sushruta. Another example of the innovation is in case of dreaming. thermography, that identification of a hidden foreign body and inflammatory activity by applying either chandana or ghruta over the area so that the thermal variation is observed. A very simple model of identifying these thermal changes. The development, of course, the tools which we now have may be more sensitive tools, whereas that kind of innovative idea also is a model which we have to pick up, or a character which we have to pick up, or using absorbable features of the ant heads in the intestines also is one of that area of innovation. You should also say scientist in that sense, like it's not simply innovation, a methodical development of instruments based upon multiple inputs is the idea of scientific nature. Another important character which we could see is having a spontaneity in crisis. When you do not have sufficient instruments and the environment is not congenial for a methodical treatment, you make use of unconventional tools and unconventional methods to achieve the goal. The example of Shalyakarana in a case of warfield injury, by making use of either a horse or a branch of a tree to remove the arrow, is a model of that kind of a crisis. People often make a joke about it, but it's not an issue of joke, but it's a very serious issue. When in a warfield, when a arrow has hit a person, and if you have to remove the arrow, and simple physical attempts by a person is not enough, tie that arrow to a horse and beat the horse, and making use of the horse power, the arrow can be removed. And this is a model of making use of any of the available tools in a case of crisis, and that's a very important message to every practicing surgeon. Many times you may have to face such kind of situation where either you may not have instrument, you may see an unexpected diagnosis like condition, and you have to be prepared for something which is unknown, and that is an important trait of sushruta. Sushruta was also a good ideologist. He never hesitated to comment whenever there is something which is not acceptable. Non-acceptable things were very strongly criticized with bold words. Like Shastram Gurum Khod Giram Adaya Upasya Tasat Yakarma Kurte Vaidya Savidyo Adnya Tidaskaraha. The correct method of education should be in a methodical manner from a teacher to the student, and if this methodical study is not followed, that's considered as a theft. Sushruta would not hesitate to call them as the thieves. Or similarly, a surgeon who doesn't have a proper identification of the indication for the surgery also is considered as shapata. That's the lowest category of the society. The selected words for blaming also are very classical. यश्चिनति आमज्ञानाद् यश्च पक्वम् उपेक्षते शपथाविव मन्तव्यो ताव अनिश्चितकार्यम्. Or a person who doesn't have a proper skill of the surgical techniques and uses the wrong techniques, he is compared to a poisonous snake. So use of these words like a thief, poisonous snake, shapata, etc. That suggests of a bold ideology which need to be there, which also is a character, personal trait of sushruta. And another personal trait of sushruta is committed to lead principles. Yesha agama siddhatvad tathiva paradarshanath mantravat samprayuktavyaha namimam katanchana. Though you are not supposed to innovate, but innovation should not be against the basic concepts of the your science, and they have to be followed, but within that, based upon their skill, there is always a function for the yukti development. So this kind of a combination of a committed to the lay principle and innovation, both of them are the important characters of sushruta. In addition to these personal traits, the other surgical identity, which is well known and which is very frequently discussed, like a timely intervention, precision in surgery, conservative approach of surgery, team ideology, importance of hygiene, and importance of comprehensive care. These also are the most important surgical identity of Sushruta's personality. Now coming to the last point, like then with this, what I would say is Sushruta is a combination of these traits, And these traits definitely can be cultivable in every human being if there is an effort. And hence, who is sushruta? I would say you and me can be sushruta. Though you may not be able to become a sushruta, at least you can become a saushruti with the dedication and commitment which can make up as a saushruti. Saushrutis are followers of sushruta. So on this occasion of Sushruta Jayanti, I would be wishing you, and the message is, let us celebrate every moment of the life as a Sushruta Jayanti with an attempt to develop at least one or two of the traits of Sushruta so that the tradition of Sushruta continues to serve the society. With this, let me thank you all.